The ultimatum. The Varathian Empire had conquered 17 star systems in the past decade without firing a single shot. Their method was simple, elegant, and had never failed. Arrive in overwhelming force, demonstrate superior technology, and wait for the inevitable surrender. Ambassador Kelthros stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, his 4 arms folded in ceremonial confidence. Through the viewport, the blue-green sphere of Earth rotated peacefully, utterly unaware of the fleet that had just emerged from hyperspace. "Third planet ambassador," reported Captain Yilmira, her crimson scales gleaming under the bridge lights. "Preliminary scans indicate a civilization barely 3 centuries into their industrial age. They've achieved rudimentary spaceflight but haven't left their immediate stellar vicinity." Kelthros allowed himself a thin smile. "Perfect. Another simple acquisition. Broadcast the proclamation of compliance in their dominant languages." Within moments, every communication device on Earth received the same message. Dr. Cassian Drake was in his MIT office when his computer screen flickered, displaying a being that looked like a bipedal mantis wrapped in ceremonial robes. "People of Earth," the translation was flawless, "I am Ambassador Kelthros of the Varathian Empire. Your world has been selected for integration into our glorious dominion. You have achieved the threshold of interplanetary awareness and thus fall under Imperial jurisdiction. You will surrender governance to Imperial authority within 72 Earth hours. Resistance is inadvisable. Compliance ensures your continued survival and prosperity. Choose wisely." The screen went dark. Cassian sat frozen for exactly 5 seconds before his phone exploded with calls. As one of the world's leading xenobiology theorists, a field that had been purely hypothetical until 3 minutes ago, he suddenly became very important. 12 hours later, he stood in an emergency session of the United Nations Security Council, surrounded by world leaders whose faces ranged from terrified to furious. "Dr. Drake," the Secretary General's voice was steady despite the tremor in her hands, "you've reviewed the technological data they transmitted. Your assessment?" Cassian pulled up holographic displays. "Their ships operate on principles we don't understand. Faster-than-light travel, energy weapons, gravity manipulation. By our measurements, they're at least 500 years more advanced. Maybe 1,000. "Can we fight them?" asked General Nkosi of the African Union Defense Coalition. "Fight them?" Cassian laughed bitterly. "General, their smallest destroyer generates more power than our entire planetary grid. They have 47 ships in orbit. We have 3 functional space stations and maybe 24 missiles that could theoretically reach them, and their shields would probably laugh those off." "So we surrender," someone muttered. "No." The voice came from the back of the room. Admiral Takara Shen, commander of the Pan-Pacific Defense Network, stood up. "We don't surrender." "Admiral," the Secretary General said carefully, "Dr. Drake just explained." "I heard what he explained," Takara interrupted. "They're more advanced, more powerful. But there's something they don't understand about humans." She walked to the center of the room. "We've spent our entire history being told what we can't do. Can't fly. Can't split the atom. Can't leave our planet. Can't cure diseases. We did all of it anyway." Cassian found himself nodding. "She's right. Every projection we made said Mars colonization was impossible with our technology. We have 17,000 people living there now. So what do you propose?" asked Premier Zhou. Takara smiled grimly. "We comply. Sort of. We use the 72 hours to study them, learn everything we can. When they come down to take control, we're polite. Cooperative. Boring." She paused. "And while they're busy congratulating themselves on another easy conquest, we figure out how to kick them off our world." In orbit, Kelthros reviewed compliance reports from his previous conquests. The Threnodai had surrendered in 48 hours. The Milvari in 36. The Karath in just 12, once they witnessed a demonstration of Imperial firepower. "Earth's governments are requesting a negotiation session," Yilmira reported. "They want to discuss terms." "Of course they do." Kelthros's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. "They always want to discuss terms. It makes them feel they have agency in their own subjugation. Schedule it for tomorrow. Let them talk themselves into compliance." What Kelthros didn't know, what 17 previous conquests hadn't taught him, was that humans had a peculiar relationship with hopeless situations. While other species calculated odds and surrendered to mathematical certainty, humans had a history of looking at impossible circumstances and saying, "Watch this." In laboratories across Earth, scientists began analyzing every scrap of data from the alien transmission. In military bunkers, strategists studied the alien fleet's movements. In homes and offices and streets, 8 billion humans began doing what they did best: adapting. The Varathian Empire expected submission. They were about to learn that humanity didn't have a word for impossible that couldn't be prefixed with previously. First contact. The negotiation chamber materialized in the middle of Geneva's diplomatic quarter, a gift from the Varathians to demonstrate their technological superiority. The crystalline structure appeared overnight, growing from the ground like an impossible flower made of light and mathematics. Cassian Drake stood with the human delegation, watching Ambassador Kelthros and his entourage descend from their shuttle. The Varathian ambassador moved with the confidence of someone who'd done this dozens of times before. Secretary General Amara, Kelthros's translator, rendered his clicking speech into perfect English. "How gracious of you to accept our invitation to discuss your integration." Amara, a former refugee who'd risen to lead the United Nations through sheer determination, smiled diplomatically. "Ambassador, we appreciate the opportunity for dialogue. Though I should clarify, we haven't accepted anything yet." Kelthros's antennae twitched in what Cassian was learning to recognize as amusement. "Of course. The illusion of choice comforts lesser species. Please, shall we begin?" Inside the chamber, the Varathians had prepared presentations showing the benefits of imperial membership. Holographic displays showed conquered worlds transformed into efficient tributaries, their populations working in harmony with imperial directives. "As you can see," Kelthros gestured to images of alien cities, "imperial governance brings order, prosperity, and technological advancement. Your primitive conflicts will cease. Your resources will be optimally allocated. Your people will find purpose in service to the greater whole." "Fascinating," Takara said from her position beside Amara. The admiral's face was unreadable. "And what happens to our governments? Our cultures?" "Unnecessary redundancies will be eliminated," Kelthros said smoothly. "Efficient species require only one voice. Local customs may continue if they don't interfere with productivity." Cassian watched the other delegates. Premier Zhou's jaw was clenched. General Nkosi's hands were fists under the table. President Volkov was making notes with aggressive pen strokes. But everyone kept their expressions neutral. "We'll need time to review your proposals," Amara said. "Perhaps a tour of your vessels? To better understand the systems we'd be integrating with?" This was the gambit. Takara had suggested it during prep. If the Varathians were confident in their superiority, they might allow humans aboard their ships. Every sensor, every measurement, every observation could be vital intelligence. Kelthros considered. An unusual request. Previous acquisitions preferred to simply accept the inevitable. "Humans like to understand things," Cassian interjected, playing his role. "We're curious by nature. Surely the Empire appreciates species that seek knowledge?" "Very well," Kelthros decided. "A limited tour of the Eternal Dominion. Dr. Drake, as your scientific representative, you may accompany Captain Yilmara. But understand, this changes nothing. Your compliance deadline remains unchanged." 3 hours later, Cassian stood in the engineering section of the Varathian flagship, his concealed sensors working overtime. Captain Yilmara was explaining their quantum displacement drives with the bored patience of someone addressing a child. "The quantum foam matrices allow us to phase shift through dimensional barriers," she said, not bothering to simplify. "Your species won't achieve this for centuries if ever." Cassian nodded enthusiastically, playing the odd primitive while his doctoral training catalogued everything. The energy signatures were unusual but followed recognizable physics. The power coupling had an inefficiency in the tertiary phase converter, a weakness maybe. The gravity plating operated on a frequency that human brains found slightly nauseating, which explained the headache building behind his eyes. "Incredible," he breathed. "And the weapons systems?" Yilmara's scales rippled, pride. "Our plasma accelerators can slag a continent from orbit. Shall I demonstrate on one of your uninhabited landmasses?" The Korath found such demonstrations very persuasive. "That won't be necessary," Cassian said quickly. "I believe you." What he didn't say, his sensors had just mapped the entire firing sequence of those weapons. Charge time, 4.7 seconds. Targeting lock, another 2.3 seconds. Recycle time, 30 seconds. Not invincible, just advanced. Back on Earth, the data Cassian transmitted was being analyzed by every major research institution simultaneously. Dr. Yuki Tanaka at Tokyo University was mapping the power systems. Dr. James Okonkwo in Lagos was modeling the weapons patterns. Dr. Sarah Zimmerman at CERN was working on the physics of their shielding. Meanwhile, Major Reina Vasquez was doing something the Varathians would never expect. She was reverse engineering their arrogance. They've conquered 17 systems without resistance, she explained to her team at DARPA. That's their weakness. They expect easy victories. They broadcast their arrival, give ultimatums, show overwhelming force. It's intimidation as strategy. So? Asked her second-in-command. So they've never had to fight a guerrilla war. Never faced an opponent who didn't play by their rules. Reina pulled up historical files. Vietnam. Afghanistan. Every resistance movement that defeated a superior conventional force. They won because they refused to fight the battle their enemy expected. You're suggesting we go insurgent against an interstellar empire? I'm suggesting, Reina said, that they've never fought someone who loses every battle but wins the war. On the Eternal Dominion, Kelthros reviewed the tour reports with satisfaction. The human scientist had been appropriately amazed, the human admiral appropriately intimidated. Their governments were fracturing, some nations pushing for acceptance, others for resistance. The standard pattern. They'll comply within the deadline, he told Yilmira confidently. They always do once they understand the futility of resistance. But in laboratories and military installations across Earth, humans were doing what they'd always done when faced with superior opponents. They were learning, adapting, finding the cracks in the armor. The Varathians had made their first mistake. They'd given humanity 72 hours. For a species that had gone from first flight to the moon in 66 years, 72 hours was a very long time. Divergent strategies. With 48 hours remaining until the deadline, Earth's leadership convened in the underground crisis center beneath Geneva. The room was chaos barely contained by diplomatic protocol. The Eastern Coalition proposes compliance, Ambassador Chen announced, his face projected on multiple screens. We cannot win a military confrontation. Better to integrate peacefully and work from within their system. Absolutely not, General Nkosi slammed his fist on the table. We've seen what integration means. Our governments dissolved, our militaries disbanded, our people turned into imperial servants. I'd rather die fighting. That can be arranged, muttered someone off-screen. Enough. Secretary General Amara's voice cut through the argument. We're not here to fragment into competing strategies. Takara, what do we actually know? Admiral Takara Shun pulled up holographic displays showing the Varathian fleet. Dr. Drake's reconnaissance gave us critical data. Their ships are formidable but not invincible. However, Captain Yilmira was correct. In a conventional engagement, they'd annihilate us in minutes. So we're back to surrender, someone said. No. Cashin stood up, his eyes red from 48 hours without sleep. We're back to being creative. Their technology is advanced but it's standardized. Every ship has the same shield frequency, the same power signature, the same operational patterns. They've conquered 17 systems with the same playbook. And that helps us how? Premier Zhou asked. Because, Takara smiled grimly, predictability is a vulnerability. Major Vasquez, show them. Reina Vasquez activated her presentation. The Varathians expect either submission or conventional warfare. We're going to give them neither. Dr. Zimmerman's team at CERN found something interesting about their shields. They're optimized against high-energy weapons. Plasma, particle beams, antimatter. Know what they're not optimized against. Kinetic impacts, Cashin finished. Old-fashioned mass and velocity. Our rail guns, General Nkosi's eyes widened. The electromagnetic accelerators we've been testing for Mars cargo launches. Exactly, Reina continued. We've been launching 20-ton payloads at Mars velocity for 3 years. We have 47 functional railgun installations globally. If we recalibrate them for orbit, we turn our cargo system into the largest artillery platform in human history, Takara finished. And according to Dr. Zimmerman's models, their shields will barely register kinetic projectiles until impact. Ambassador Chin frowned. Even if this works, and that's a massive if, you're talking about attacking the Varathian fleet. That's not compliance. That's declaring war on an interstellar empire. No, Amara said quietly. Everyone turned to her. We're not declaring war. We're refusing to surrender. There's a difference. A semantic difference that will get us killed, Chin countered. Maybe, Amara acknowledged. But I've spent my life watching what happens when powerful forces expect weaker ones to submit without question. I was 8 years old when my village was razed because we couldn't defend ourselves. I swore I'd never be helpless again. She looked around the room. Earth is not helpless. We're outnumbered and outgunned, but we're not helpless. The vote was close. 12 nations voted for the resistance plan. 8 voted for negotiated compliance. 3 abstained. But the majority held. 48 hours, Takara said. We need to recalibrate every railgun, coordinate firing solutions, and do it all without the Varathians noticing. It's impossible. Cashin laughed tiredly. I'm starting to think that's just our species' way of saying, give us a few hours. In orbit, Captain Yulmura reviewed sensor data from Earth's surface. Unusual electromagnetic activity at several locations. Probably the primitives scrambling to prepare for Imperial integration. She filed it as low priority and returned to planning the occupation. Their military installations are standing down, she reported to Kelthros. Several nations have already begun dismantling command structures. Efficient, Kelthros approved. Perhaps the most sensible species we've encountered. Schedule the formal surrender ceremony for the deadline. I want maximum visibility, broadcast to their entire planet. Let them see their leaders submit. What Kelthros interpreted as preparation for surrender was actually Dr. Tanaka's team in Tokyo recalibrating the Tsukuba railgun facility. What looked like military stand-down was General Nkosi redistributing forces to railgun defense positions. What seemed like dismantled command structures was actually the creation of a distributed network that couldn't be decapitated by a single strike. In Beijing, Dr. Wei Lin was solving a problem that seemed impossible. The railguns are designed for precision cargo delivery, not combat targeting. We need to hit a moving target in high orbit with a projectile traveling at 3% light speed. So we need prediction algorithms, her colleague said. But their ships maneuver using technology we don't understand. No, Wei smiled. We need them to not maneuver. Major Vasquez, can your psychological profile predict their response to provocation? Reina considered. They're arrogant. Confident. If we launched one obvious attack, missiles, fighters, something they expect, they'd hold position to destroy it. Demonstrate superiority. How long would they hold position? 30 seconds. Maybe 45. Then we fire missiles as bait, Wei said. And while they're busy destroying them with their superior weapons, we hit them with chunks of steel moving at 10,000 kilometers per second. In Moscow, President Volkov reviewed the plan with his military advisors. This is insane. Even if it works, even if we damage their fleet, we've made an enemy of an empire that spans star systems. With respect, Mr. President, his chief of staff said, we were already their enemy. We just didn't know it yet. Kelthros doesn't see us as people to negotiate with, he sees us as problems to be processed. And if we fail? Then we fail fighting. Better than failing on our knees. At the Mauna Kea Observatory in Hawaii, Dr. Patricia Chin, no relation to Ambassador Chin, was coordinating the astronomical calculations. We need firing solutions for 47 ground installations hitting 47 orbital targets simultaneously. The timing has to be perfect within milliseconds. That's why we built the quantum calculation cluster, her assistant said. 3 years ago when we thought we were using it to model stellar evolution. Funny, Patricia said without smiling, how our peaceful research always seems useful in a crisis. 48 hours became 36. 36 became 24. The clock was counting down and Earth was running out of time. But in laboratories and military installations, command centers and university basements, humans were doing what they'd always done when facing extinction. They were working miracles. The Varathian Empire expected submission. They were about to get humanity's answer. The defiance. With 12 hours remaining, the Varathian fleet assumed standard occupation formation. Kelthros stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, reviewing the surrender ceremony protocols. Everything was proceeding according to Imperial standard. Ambassador, Yulmura reported, we're receiving a transmission from Earth's governments. They're requesting an extension to the deadline. Kelthros's mandibles clicked in amusement. Predictable. They always ask for more time, as if delay will change the mathematics of their situation. What reason do they provide? They claim technical difficulties in coordinating their planetary government structures. They request 48 additional hours. Denied. Inform them that the deadline is absolute. If they require assistance establishing proper governance, Imperial administrators are prepared to take direct control at the designated time. What Kelthros didn't know was that the transmission was a test. In the DARPA bunker beneath Colorado, Reina Vasquez watched the response with satisfaction. 12 seconds to receive, process and respond, she told her team. That's the lag in their communication system. We can use that. How? asked her second-in-command. If we transmit our attack signal exactly 12 seconds before railgun fire, their response will arrive exactly at impact. They won't have time to maneuver. You're cutting this incredibly close. I know, Reyna said. But close is all we've got. In Geneva, Secretary General Amara addressed the emergency session one final time. The Varathians have rejected our request. In 10 hours they expect our formal surrender. Instead, I'm proposing we show them who humanity really is. The chamber erupted in debate. Ambassador Chin rose. Madam Secretary, I cannot support this. My government wishes to formally dissent from this reckless action. Noted and recorded, Amara said. Any nation that wishes to negotiate separate terms with the Varathians is free to do so. But the majority of Earth's nations stand together. If we're going to face extinction, we face it on our feet. In Tokyo, Dr. Tanaka made final adjustments to the railgun targeting systems. Her hands shook slightly, not from fear but from exhaustion and too much coffee. Yuki, her assistant said gently, when this is over, regardless of how it ends, you should know, it's been an honor working with you. She smiled tiredly. When this is over, Kenji, I'm sleeping for a week. Then I'm going to wake up and figure out how their faster-than-light drives work. Because if we survive this, we're not staying on this planet waiting for the next empire to show up. At NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, Commander Marcus Webb prepared the Ares station crew for what might be their final mission. The 18 personnel aboard humanity's largest space station had volunteered for the most dangerous part of the plan. When the shooting starts, Marcus explained via secure transmission, you'll be in the crossfire. Your job is to maintain trajectory and keep broadcasting. If this works, you're our eyes in orbit. If it doesn't, replied Station Commander Eva Rostova, at least we'll have the best view of the fireworks. Don't worry about us, Houston. We didn't come up here to hide. In the Sahara Desert, General Nkosi walked among the soldiers defending the Tamanrasset railgun installation. These men and women from a dozen African nations stood guard over one of the 47 weapons that might save, or doom, their species. Will it work, General? A young corporal asked. Nkosi looked at the massive electromagnetic accelerator, designed to send mining equipment to Mars, now aimed at the sky with lethal intent. I don't know, son. But I know we're trying. That's all anyone can ask. 6 hours to deadline. Across the planet, similar scenes played out. In Moscow, President Volkov toasted with vodka to the magnificent foolishness of the human spirit. In Sao Paulo, tens of thousands gathered in the streets, not in panic but in defiant prayer. In Mumbai, children wrote messages on paper airplanes and launched them skyward, messages to aliens they hoped would never read them because the plan would work. In the Eternal Dominion's Intelligence Center, a junior analyst named Threxos noticed something odd. Captain Yulmura, the electromagnetic activity we noted earlier, it's synchronized. 47 locations, all showing identical power signatures. Yulmura reviewed the data. Probably their primitive power grid reconfiguring for Imperial systems. Ignore it. But Captain, the energy levels are unusually high. Ensign, Yulmura's voice carried the weight of 17 successful conquests. Primitive species do illogical things when facing the inevitable. File it and focus on occupation logistics. Threxos hesitated, then complied. Later he would wonder if that moment could have changed everything. But in Imperial service, questioning senior officers was more dangerous than questioning sensor data. 3 hours to deadline. Cash and Drake sat in the MIT command center they'd converted into a coordination hub. Around him, the world's greatest scientific minds monitored systems that had never been designed for what they were about to do. Dr. Drake, Dr. Zimmerman's voice came through from CERN, final shield analysis is complete. The kinetic impact should penetrate, but I'm only 70% confident. 70% is better than 0, Cashin said. And significantly better than 100% chance of subjugation. You're not worried? I'm terrified, Cashin admitted. But I'm also angry. They came here expecting us to roll over because we're less advanced. They're about to learn that advancement isn't the same as evolution. We've been evolving to survive for 4 million years. They've been coasting on technology. 1 hour to deadline. Admiral Takara Shin stood in the Pacific Defense Network Command Center, watching 47 screens showing 47 railgun installations across the globe. Every one showed green status. Ready. All stations confirmed target lock, her tactical officer reported. Firing solutions computed and verified. We have a 92% probability of simultaneous impact across all targets. And the 8%? Takara asked. Margin of error. Could be off by milliseconds. In other words, Takara said quietly, we're about to bet the future of humanity on the most precisely coordinated military strike in history, using weapons that were never meant to be weapons, against an enemy we don't fully understand. She took a deep breath. Notify all stations. Prepare to fire on my mark. 30 minutes to deadline. Kelthros prepared his speech for the surrender ceremony. He'd given variations of this address 17 times before, and the words flowed easily. People of Earth, today you begin a new chapter in your species' evolution. Under Imperial guidance, you will transcend your primitive conflicts and join the community of advanced civilizations. Ambassador, a communications officer interrupted, we're receiving another transmission from Earth. More delays. Kelthros sighed. Inform them. No, sir. It's not a request. It's a statement. On every screen aboard every Varathian ship, Secretary General Amara's face appeared. Her expression was calm, almost serene. Ambassador Kelthros, people of the Varathian Empire, I speak for the majority of Earth's nations and peoples. We have carefully considered your offer of integration into your domain. She paused. Our answer is no. Kelthros's antennae shot upright in shock. In 17 conquests, no species had simply refused. We will not surrender our sovereignty, Amara continued. We will not submit our people to your authority. We will not abandon our freedom for your promised efficiency. If you want Earth, Ambassador, you'll have to take it. And we will make you regret the attempt. The transmission ended. For a moment, the bridge of the Eternal Dominion was silent. Then Kelthros began to laugh, a harsh clicking sound. Magnificent, he said. Foolish but magnificent. Very well. If they choose extinction over integration, we shall accommodate them. Captain Yilmura, demonstrate the consequences of refusal. Target their largest city. Charge weapons. Compliance, Yilmura said. She input targeting coordinates. New York City targeted. Plasma accelerators charging. For 3, 2. Fire all stations. Takara's command echoed across 47 installations simultaneously. In the space of a single heartbeat, 47 electromagnetic railguns unleashed their payloads. 47 20-ton projectiles, accelerated to 3% of light speed, screamed into orbit. And the Varathian Empire learned what defiance truly meant. The battle. The Varathian fleet sensors registered the launches immediately, but classified them as primitive missiles. Expected, irrelevant, easily countered. Incoming projectiles, reported the Eternal Dominion's tactical officer. 47 objects, low velocity by our standards. Intercept time, 90 seconds. Captain Yilmura barely glanced at the display. Point defense will handle them. Continue charging main weapons. What the Varathians didn't understand was that their sensors measured velocity in terms of their own technology. By their standards, 3% of light speed was indeed low velocity. By human standards, and by the standards of kinetic physics, it was devastating. The railgun projectiles weren't sophisticated. They were simply dense tungsten carbide slugs, each weighing 20 tons, each carrying kinetic energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. No guidance systems, no warheads, just mass and momentum. At 70 seconds, the Varathian point defense activated automatically. Energy beams lanced out, targeting the incoming projectiles. In the DARPA bunker, Reyna watched her psychological prediction play out. They're holding formation to shoot down our missiles. Predictable. The point defense beam struck the tungsten slugs. Against missiles or fighters, these weapons would have been instantly vaporized. Against solid 20-ton chunks of metal moving at 10,000 kilometers per second, they merely heated the surface by a few hundred degrees. At 40 seconds, the Varathian tactical systems registered something wrong. These projectiles weren't exploding when hit. They weren't maneuvering. They weren't even slowing down. Captain, the tactical officer's voice carried the first hint of concern. The projectiles are not responding to countermeasures. Recommend emergency evasion. But Yilmura was still focused on charging the plasma accelerators, still preparing to demonstrate Varathian superiority by destroying a human city. Increase point defense intensity. They're just primitive kinetics. At 20 seconds, the tactical computer's alarm finally broke through. Impact warning. Shield penetration probable. Yilmura's head snapped up. What? Shields to maximum. All ships evasive. Too late. The first projectile hit the destroyer Relentless Conquest amidships. The Varathian shields, optimized for energy weapons, offered as much resistance as wet tissue paper to a bullet. The tungsten slug punched through the shield, through the hull, through the reactor containment, and out the other side in 0.003 seconds. The destroyer's reactor went critical. The explosion lit up Earth's night sky like a second sun. 46 more impacts followed within the next 2 seconds. On the Ares station, Commander Rostova and her crew watched in awe as the Varathian fleet, the unstoppable armada that had conquered 17 star systems, suddenly became a field of explosions and debris. Direct hits on 31 vessels, she reported, her voice barely maintaining professional calm. My God, it actually worked. But even as victories flared in the orbital darkness, the battle was far from over. 16 Varathian ships had survived, either missed by the initial barrage or saved by pure chance. And now those ships were no longer arrogant conquerors. They were angry. All ships weapons free. Kelthros's voice thundered across the fleet's command channel. Return fire. The Eternal Dominion, damaged but operational, brought its massive plasma accelerators to bear on Earth's surface. The weapons that could slag a continent charged for firing. No you don't, Admiral Takara muttered. Second wave fire. The railguns had taken precious minutes to recycle their magnetic coils, but they were ready. Another volley of kinetic death launched skyward. But this time the Varathians were ready. Ylmera overrode safety protocols and poured maximum power into the shields. The surviving ships broke formation, scattering across orbital space. 3 more ships died to the second wave. 13 remained. Plasma accelerators ready, the weapons officer reported. Target locked. Fire. Kelthros screamed. The plasma beam that lanced down from orbit carried enough energy to vaporize a small mountain. It struck the ocean 30 kilometers from New York City, having been thrown off target by the ship's evasive maneuvers. The resulting steam explosion was visible from space, and the shockwave shattered windows in Manhattan. But the city survived. They missed, Cashin said in disbelief, watching from MIT. The damage threw off their targeting. They won't miss twice, Takara replied. Third wave fire. Target the flagship. Across Earth's surface, the railguns that had survived Varathian return fire launched their third volley. But the Varathians had learned. They'd stopped holding position, stopped assuming superiority. Only 1 ship died to the third wave. 12 remained, including the Eternal Dominion. Their shields are adapting, Dr. Zimmerman reported from CERN. They're rotating frequencies trying to find something that works against kinetics. Can they? Takara asked. Eventually. Physics is physics. But it'll take them time to reconfigure their systems. Time was the one thing neither side had. On the Varathian ships, damage reports painted a catastrophic picture. 35 vessels destroyed or disabled. Thousands of Imperial personnel dead. An entire battle fleet brought to its knees by primitives who shouldn't have been capable of resistance. Status? Kelthros demanded, ichor leaking from a gash where debris had struck him. Engineering reports shield recalibration will take 4 hours minimum, Ylmera said, her scales scorched from a plasma conduit explosion. We can return fire, but we're vulnerable to their kinetic weapons. Then we retreat beyond their range and bombard from there. Sir, our targeting systems are damaged. Long-range bombardment would be ineffective. We need close orbit for precision strikes. Kelthros faced an impossible choice. Close orbit meant vulnerability to human weapons. High orbit meant inability to effectively attack. And retreating entirely meant admitting defeat to a species barely 3 centuries into space exploration. The decision was made for him. Admiral, the sensor officer reported, detecting massive energy signatures from Earth's surface. It's not the railguns. It's something else. On Earth, Dr. Tanaka smiled grimly. Phase 2. They think they know all our tricks. Across the planet, 47 different installations. Particle accelerators, fusion research facilities, experimental power plants, all activated simultaneously. They'd been designed for peaceful research. Now they became the most powerful directed energy weapons humanity had ever built. The Varathians optimized their shields against energy weapons, Dr. Tanaka had explained during planning. So after we hit them with kinetics and forced them to reconfigure their shields for kinetics, we hit them with energy. The beams that lanced skyward weren't as powerful as Varathian plasma accelerators. But they didn't need to be. They just needed to hit shields optimized for the wrong threat. 2 more Varathian ships died, their shields failing against weapons that should have been harmless. Retreat. Kelthros finally screamed the word he'd never imagined saying. All ships retreat to high orbit. The surviving 10 ships of the once mighty fleet burned hard, escaping Earth's immediate orbital space. Behind them, they left debris fields that would take years to clear, and the shattered remains of their assumed superiority. On the Ares station, Eva Rostova watched them flee. Houston, the Varathian fleet is retreating to lunar orbit. I repeat, they're retreating. Across Earth, from Geneva to Tokyo, from Moscow to Nairobi, from Beijing to Sao Paulo, 8 billion humans heard those words and erupted in celebration. In the streets, strangers embraced. In military installations, hardened soldiers wept. In laboratories, scientists who'd worked miracles collapsed in exhaustion and relief. In the Geneva Command Center, Secretary General Amara allowed herself exactly 3 seconds of triumph before her training reasserted itself. Admiral Shen, status report. Takara's face was grim despite the victory. 17 railgun installations destroyed by Varathian return fire. Estimated 3,000 casualties from their plasma strike near New York. The Tsukuba facility in Tokyo is offline, direct hit. And we're out of ammunition. The railguns are designed for cargo launches, not sustained combat. We've exhausted our supply of pre-manufactured projectiles. We could make more, but it would take weeks. So if they come back before we resupply and repair, we have energy weapons that barely scratch them and nothing else. In lunar orbit, Kelthros stared at his devastated fleet. 10 ships remained operational from 47. 10. Against primitives who shouldn't have been able to threaten a single vessel. Contact Imperial Command, he said quietly. Inform them that Earth's conquest has encountered complications. Request reinforcements. Sir, the nearest Imperial fleet is 3 months away at maximum hyperspace velocity. 3 months. Kelthros looked at the blue-green planet hanging in the void. 3 months for the humans to prepare. 3 months for them to study Varathian technology from the wreckage. 3 months for them to figure out new ways to kill his people. For the first time in his career, Ambassador Kelthros understood what it meant to be afraid. And on Earth, humanity faced the same realization. They'd won the battle, but the war was just beginning. The aftermath. The wreckage that rained from orbit for the next week became known as Kelthros's tears. Fragments of Varathian vessels burned up in the atmosphere, creating meteor showers that lit up nights across the globe. Some pieces were large enough to survive re-entry, gifts of alien technology scattered across 6 continents. Dr. Cassian Drake stood in what remained of a Varathian destroyer that had crashed in the Australian outback. Around him, an international team of scientists worked with almost religious fervor to understand the technology that had nearly conquered them. This is incredible, Dr. Tanaka breathed, examining the quantum displacement drive. The engineering is elegant. Different from our approaches, but the underlying principles. We can learn this. We have to learn it fast, Cassian said. Kelthros called for reinforcements. We have maybe 3 months before the next fleet arrives. 3 months to go from kinetic slugs to faster-than-light travel? Dr. Okonkwo laughed bitterly. Even for us, that's impossible. Then we'd better get started, Cassian replied. Impossible just means nobody's done it yet. In Geneva, the mood was less optimistic. Secretary General Amara faced a holographic conference with Earth's leaders, a conference that was fracturing along predictable lines. We got lucky, Ambassador Chin argued. We surprised them with tactics they didn't expect. Next time they'll be ready. We should negotiate while we have leverage. Negotiate what? General Nkosi countered. They came here to conquer us. We humiliated them. You think they're going to forgive that? The general is right, Admiral Takara interjected. I've analyzed Varathian communications we intercepted. Their culture doesn't understand negotiation between unequals. You either dominate or you're dominated. So we fight until they annihilate us? Chin demanded. We fight until they decide we're too costly to conquer, Takara corrected. Make Earth's price so high that the Empire decides we're not worth it. That's assuming the Empire thinks rationally about costs and benefits, Premier Zhou said. What if they decide to make an example of us? Show other potential resistors what happens when you defy imperial authority? The question hung in the air because nobody had a good answer. In lunar orbit, Kelthros wrestled with the same question. His remaining ships had established a defensive position around the moon, far enough from Earth to be safe from kinetic weapons, close enough to monitor the planet and prevent any human vessels from leaving the system. Ambassador, Captain Yomura approached carefully. Kelthros had been in a dangerous mood since the battle. We've received a response from Imperial Command. And? Fleet Admiral Zinthros is dispatching the 7th Conquest Fleet, 80 vessels including 6 Dreadnought-class battleships. Estimated arrival, 97 solar cycles. Kelthros calculated, about 3 Earth months. Did the Admiral include any commentary? Ylmera hesitated. The Admiral expressed profound disappointment that a species barely capable of interplanetary travel inflicted such casualties on an Imperial fleet. He questioned whether you properly assessed the situation. In other words, Kelthros's career was over. If he was lucky, he'd be demoted to a backwater administrative post. If unlucky, the Empire didn't tolerate failure gracefully. What else? He demanded. Ensign Threxos filed a supplementary report, noting that he observed unusual energy signatures before the attack but was ordered to disregard them. Kelthros's mandibles clicked in fury. The ensign was covering himself, documenting that he'd noticed the warning signs. Smart politics, devastating for Kelthros. Very well, Kelthros said coldly. If the humans want a war, we'll give them one. But this time we do it properly. Captain, begin reconnaissance of Earth's defensive installations. I want targeting data on every railgun, every power facility, every military base. When the 7th Fleet arrives, we'll coordinate a simultaneous strike that eliminates their ability to resist. Sir, with respect, the humans have shown themselves to be resourceful. 3 months gives them time to prepare. And it gives us time to study them. They won this battle through surprise and tactical innovation. Next time we'll be ready for their tricks. What neither Kelthros nor Ylmera fully grasped was that humans didn't repeat tricks. They invented new ones. At the DARPA facility in Colorado, Major Reina Vasquez coordinated with military planners across the globe. The giant holographic display showed Earth, the Moon, and the positions of the 10 remaining Varathian ships. They're watching us, she said. Every launch, every test, every military movement, they're gathering intelligence. So we give them what they expect to see, suggested General Nkosi via video link. We rebuild our railguns, repair our energy weapons, and make it look like we're preparing for a repeat of the first battle. While actually doing what? Asked President Volkov. While actually doing something completely different, Reina smiled. The railguns worked once. The Varathians will prepare for them. We need weapons they won't anticipate. Such as. Dr. Patricia Chin from Mauna Kea Observatory joined the conference. I've been analyzing the wreckage of Varathian ships. Their reactor containment uses a specific exotic matter field. It's very stable, unless you introduce a particular resonance frequency. In English, Doctor? Volkov requested. Their power plants are bombs if you know the right frequency to broadcast. We could theoretically trigger overloads remotely. Theoretically? Reina pressed. I need live samples to calibrate the frequency. Which means we need to capture a Varathian ship, Reina finished. Intact with active reactors. The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the impossibility of that task. How? General Nkosi finally asked. Very carefully, Reina said. And probably insanely. While military planners contemplated insane strategies, Dr. Cassian Drake was pursuing a different approach. In the crash destroyer in Australia, he'd found something fascinating. A Varathian database that had survived the impact. Their data storage is quantum encrypted, Dr. Zimmerman explained via video link, but the crash damaged the encryption matrix. I think we can access it. 3 days later they broke through. What they found changed everything. This is a historical database, Cassian said, his voice tight with excitement and horror. It contains records of every Varathian conquest for the past 2 centuries. And? Takara asked. And they're not invincible. 3 conquests failed. The Varathians were driven off by species they couldn't subdue. What species? The Kryn Unity, a hive mind collective that coordinated responses faster than Varathian commanders could adapt. The Stellar Nomads, a species with no fixed installations, nothing to target. And the Nexari Convergence, a civilization so distributed across asteroid habitats that conquering them would have taken decades. Admiral Takara leaned forward. So the Empire can be beaten. Or avoided. Or made too costly to fight. Cassian pulled up more data. But there's something else. The database includes fleet movements, imperial politics, and projected expansion routes. He highlighted a star map. In 6 months, the Empire is planning to launch simultaneous conquests of 4 systems in this sector. Earth isn't even their main focus. We're just one target among several. That's actually encouraging? Dr. Tanaka said. It means they're overextended, Takara realized. They're trying to expand too fast, conquering everything they encounter. If we can make Earth costly enough, they might decide to focus their resources elsewhere. Or, General Nkosi countered, they might decide that letting one conquest fail would encourage resistance everywhere. They might make an example of us regardless of cost. Then we make the cost so high that making an example becomes impossible, Reyna said. We don't just defend Earth. We threaten their ability to project power. How? Several voices asked simultaneously. Reyna's smile was sharp. We take the fight to them. In lunar orbit, Kelthros received an unexpected communication. It wasn't encrypted military traffic or crude human attempts at negotiation. It was a simple message, text only, on an open channel. Ambassador Kelthros, this is Secretary General Amara. I propose a meeting under flag of truce. You select the location. I'll come alone and unarmed. We should talk before more people die on both sides. Kelthros stared at the message. Every instinct said it was a trap. But his strategic training said something else. The humans were divided, and this might be a faction-seeking peace. Set up a meeting, he ordered. But maintain full tactical alert. If this is a trick, I want their leader's death to serve as an example. What Kelthros didn't know was that Amara had no intention of negotiating peace. She was negotiating something far more dangerous. Time. Every day the meeting took to arrange was another day for human scientists to study Varathian wreckage. Every hour of diplomatic discussion was another hour for human engineers to build new weapons. Every minute of conversation was another minute humanity had to prepare for the storm they knew was coming. The Varathian Empire expected Earth to spend its time begging for mercy. Humanity spent it preparing for war. The Gambit. The neutral meeting site materialized in the space between Earth and the Moon, a Varathian diplomatic construct, smaller than the one in Geneva but no less impressive. Secretary General Amara approached in a shuttle piloted by Commander Marcus Webb, the vessel's transponders broadcasting peaceful intentions. You sure about this? Marcus asked as they approached the docking port. Not remotely, Amara admitted. But if we can buy even a few more weeks, it's worth the risk. Inside the construct, Ambassador Kelthros waited with Captain Yilmara and a security detail. He'd reviewed human history, studying their patterns of negotiation and warfare. Treachery was certainly possible, but the humans seemed to value their leaders. Killing their Secretary General would be considered an act of barbarism. Amara entered alone as promised. Kelthros gestured to a seat across from his own. Secretary General. I confess surprise at your request. Most species we've encountered either surrender immediately or resist until destroyed. You've chosen a third path. Dialogue, Amara said. Revolutionary, I know. Kelthros's mandibles clicked. Was that humor? These humans were peculiar. Your resistance was impressive. Costly but impressive. However, you must understand, the Empire cannot allow defiance to stand. Reinforcements are coming. When they arrive, Earth's conquest will be inevitable. Perhaps, Amara acknowledged. Or perhaps you'll face another battle like the first one. How many ships can the Empire afford to lose before it becomes politically untenable? You've studied us, Kelthros realized. The database from the crashed destroyer. We have. Just as I'm sure you've been studying us these past weeks. Amara leaned forward. Ambassador, I'm not here to surrender or negotiate terms of conquest. I'm here to propose an alternative. Which is? Leave. Voluntarily. Report to your superiors that Earth is too primitive to be worth integrating, that we lack the infrastructure and resources to justify the cost of subjugation. Move on to easier targets. Kelthros was silent for a long moment. Then he laughed, a harsh clicking sound. You don't understand the Empire. We don't retreat. Especially not from primitives who've already inflicted casualties. If we leave now, every species in this sector will believe they can resist. The Empire would fracture. Then we have a problem, Amara said quietly. Because we won't surrender. We can't. Our people won't accept it, and even if our governments ordered submission, our populations would resist. You'd be fighting insurgencies on every continent for decades. We've dealt with insurgencies before. Not like ours. Ambassador, we've spent our entire evolutionary history fighting each other. We're extremely good at it. You think your occupation forces can handle 7 continents, hundreds of nations, thousands of cultures, all united in hating you? Amara shook her head. You'll win eventually. Probably. But the cost will break your empire's economy and political will. Kelthros realized she was right. The database analysis his tactical teams had produced said the same thing. Earth's fragmented political structure actually made it harder to conquer, not easier. Subjugating a unified world government was simple. Subjugating hundreds of independent resistance movements was a nightmare. What do you propose then? A stalemate where neither side can win. I propose you leave, I convince my people we won, and everyone goes home alive. You tell your empire that Earth's conquest is not strategically viable at this time. Recommend reassessment in a century or two. By then, maybe we'll have grown up enough to join the galactic community as partners instead of subjects. Impossible. The 7th Fleet is already en route. Then redirect them. Tell Fleet Admiral Zinthros that further engagement risks unacceptable casualties for minimal strategic gain. Kelthros studied the human female. She was smaller than him, frilier, yet she sat across from him negotiating as an equal. The audacity was almost admirable. You're buying time, he said. This entire meeting is a delaying tactic. Of course it is, Amara admitted. Just as your lunar observation post is gathering intelligence on our defenses. We're both doing what we must to protect our peoples. What neither of them knew was that while they talked, the real battle was beginning. 3,000 kilometers above them, Major Reina Vasquez executed the most dangerous military operation in human history. A stealth shuttle, cobbled together from Vorathian wreckage and human ingenuity, drifted toward one of the Vorathian frigates on the edge of their lunar formation. We've got one shot at this, Reina whispered to her team of 6 commandos. The electromagnetic signature mimics Vorathian patrol craft, but it won't hold up to close inspection. They'd spent 6 weeks preparing for this mission. 6 weeks studying Vorathian technology, tactics, and psychology. 6 weeks building a plan that depended on perfect timing and incredible luck. The stealth shuttle aligned with the frigate's docking port. Reina transmitted the access codes they'd extracted from the crash destroyer's database, praying they hadn't been changed. The airlock cycled green. They were in. Moving through the Vorathian ship was like navigating an alien nightmare. The corridors were too tall, the gravity slightly wrong, the air thick with strange scents. But Reina's team had trained on mock-ups built from wreckage analysis. They knew where they were going. Engineering section. Past 3 Vorathian crew members who didn't even glance at the figures and stolen armor. Into the reactor room where the quantum displacement drive hummed with barely contained power. Dr. Patricia Chin, who'd insisted on joining the mission despite not being military, began setting up her equipment. I need 5 minutes to calibrate the resonance frequency. You have 3, Reina said, watching the security monitors. Guards change in 4 minutes. Patricia's hands flew over the alien controls, adapting her equipment to interface with Vorathian systems. The science was theoretical. They'd never tested this on an active reactor. If she was wrong about the resonance frequency, they might trigger an immediate overload. Or nothing might happen at all. Got it? Patricia whispered. Broadcasting the destabilization frequency in 3, 2. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Go, go, go. Reina shouted, and her team sprinted back toward their shuttle. Behind them, the frigate's reactor began to shake itself apart. Not an explosion, not yet, but a progressive cascade failure that would cripple the ship without killing the crew. Probably. They made it back to the shuttle with seconds to spare. As they undocked and burned for Earth, Reina watched the Vorathian frigate list to one side, power flickering, emergency systems engaging. In the diplomatic construct, Kelthros felt the deck shudder. An instant later, alarms blazed across Captain Yilmara's communicator. What? Kelthros demanded. The relentless victory, reactor failure. No signs of external attack, but the plant is cascading toward critical shutdown. Kelthros's eyes fixed on Amara. What did you do? Me? I've been here negotiating in good faith. But Amara's slight smile told him everything. The meeting was over. Back on Earth, the operation's success triggered the next phase. In laboratories across the planet, scientists began broadcasting the resonance frequency toward the remaining 9 Vorathian ships in lunar orbit. Not at full power, that would be too obvious. Just gentle pulses, barely detectable, designed to slowly degrade reactor stability over hours and days. How long until they figure out what we're doing? Dr. Tanaka asked. Depends how paranoid they are, Cashin replied. Could be hours. Could be days. Every minute their ships spend with destabilizing reactors is a minute we can exploit. Admiral Takara Shin watched the tactical display as the Vorathian formation began to dissolve. Ships were pulling back, running diagnostics, trying to figure out why their power plants were becoming unreliable. Now, she said. While they're distracted. launched the Exodus protocols. Across Earth, something unprecedented began. Hundreds of small craft, shuttles, cargo vessels, converted atmospheric craft with hastily added rocket boosters, began launching toward Mars, the asteroid belt, anywhere away from Earth. They'll see this as evacuation, General Nkosi said. Civilians fleeing before the Varathian reinforcements arrive. Let them think that, Takara replied. They don't need to know that every 10th evacuation ship is actually carrying weapons, supplies, and engineers to establish defensive positions throughout the solar system. Because Earth strategists had realized something crucial. You couldn't defend a single planet against an interstellar empire. But you could defend a solar system if you turned every moon, asteroid, and planetary orbit into a potential battlefield. The humans weren't preparing to defend Earth. They were preparing to make the entire Sol system into a fortress. In lunar orbit, Kelthros watched the human activity with growing frustration. He'd ordered his remaining ships to higher orbit, away from the mysterious reactor problems. Now the humans were scattering across their solar system and he lacked the ships to stop them. The 7th Fleet arrives in 3 weeks, Yomura reported. Fleet Admiral Zinthros is demanding a status update. Kelthros composed his report carefully. He detailed the unexpected resistance, the tactical innovations, the costs involved in subduing Earth. He noted the humans' rapid technological advancement, their willingness to take casualties, their apparent intention to resist even if resistance was futile. He did not mention that he was starting to doubt whether conquering Earth was worth the price. The response from Fleet Admiral Zinthros was terse. Stand by. 7th Fleet will complete conquest. Failure is not acceptable. 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, 80 Varathian warships would arrive, and the real battle would begin. But in those 3 weeks, humanity would have done what it did best. Evolved, adapted, and prepared to fight in ways the Varathians couldn't imagine. Secretary-General Amara addressed the United Nations one final time before the expected assault. In 3 weeks, she said, we'll face a fleet designed to conquer worlds. We'll be outgunned, outnumbered, and facing technology centuries beyond our own. By every rational measure, we should surrender. She paused, looking at the faces of Earth's representatives. But humanity has never been particularly rational. We're the species that looked at the stars and decided to visit them. We're the species that split the atom to understand the universe's secrets. We're the species that turned a deadly virus into a vaccine in less than a year. Her voice strengthened. We're the species that just fought an interstellar empire to a standstill using mining equipment and research facilities. The Varathians expect us to submit out of fear. To accept the inevitable. Amara smiled. Let's show them what happens when you corner 8 billion humans and tell them they have no choice. Let's show them that humanity doesn't surrender. We improvise. 3 weeks later, the 7th Conquest Fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. 80 warships, built to conquer civilizations, approached Earth expecting to find a cowed, defeated species ready to accept imperial rule. What they found instead would become a legend told throughout the galaxy for generations to come. Not because humanity won, though they would tell that story. Not because the Varathians lost, though they would whisper it in shame. But because on that day the galaxy learned that some species, when faced with impossible odds, don't calculate survival probabilities. They calculate how much damage they can do before going down. And humanity, as it turned out, could do a lot of damage.